We have Pankaj Rai with us this morning. Uh, Pankaj needs no introduction, and you'll have seen the background too. But I'll say a few things that I know of Pankaj. I hardly know you for a few months now, thanks to Punisha. Punisha is the one who introduced me to Pankaj, and she's the one who said we must call Pankaj for a session. And I said, why not? And we have another marathon runner. She'll speak to you during the session, Pankaj. So to start with, I think I'd like to introduce Pankaj as a marathon runner first. Not for anything else. I think he just follows that in his life too. So disciplined, um, such sense of humor. At the same time, nobody knows what is the amount of hard work that goes into in making a marathon runner. And he's also a badminton player. That's what I see in the profile. I haven't spoken to you, Pankaj, on that, but uh, an avid sports person, so to speak. And he's graduated from IIT and IIM, the best of institutes you can talk of. But more than that, I think uh, he's an amazing human being. That's how I have experienced you, Pankaj. For the last few, I think we would have had 2 or 3 chats overall in the last 6 months. But amazing human being, where his heart goes out first. And for a strategist, he presently heads strategy at Wells Fargo. For a strategist, if you use your heart and then your brain and then integrate both together, you can imagine what's going to happen to the organization. And we can see him. We can see as to why he is so successful. He's had experience with banking. He's worked with ICICI and he's worked with Standard Chartered Bank. He's worked with followed by Dell. And presently, he heads strategy where he contributes to 3 E's. I think effectiveness, efficiency, and experience both in India and the Philippines. He's worked in India and in Singapore. He has global experience, and I think he's also a talker in many of the forums. Unlike most other people who talk, I think Pankaj is one person who talks about his experiences, his life. He shares that with everybody, and he walks that talk. So we are very honored, and it's a pleasure to have you over, Pankaj. I won't take much of your time because this is your session. Over to you.
Thank you, Nirupma. And how much time do we have?
Till 10 o'clock.
Okay. And we can do a lot of Q&A, right?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And
it's all yours. You can do it any which way you want.
Yeah, because I think I would like more question and answer, because it's sometimes becomes quite boring to just tell a one-sided story without realizing whether the folks on the other side are really interested or not. So I enjoy responding to questions more than telling the story. And after an introduction like this, you can only underwhelm the audience, because you have set such high expectation by describing me in some really.
So you are being modest. You are being modest.
So let me do this. I think, and as you know, I don't necessarily prepare that, what will I say, but like you said, I like to share my experiences, and I think sharing my experiences over and over again makes me also learn. I think to me, these talks are reflections. A lot of people reflect in isolation. I reflect more publicly. I think that's my approach. So it's more for myself than probably for the audience, but hopefully the audience will get something out of it. So what I'll do is I'll just share my background and story, and also some of the lessons learned on topics related to career, because that's a topic which a lot of people talk about. Another topic of interest for me is health and fitness, so I can dwell a bit about my ideas on that area. The third topic that I like to talk about also is gender, because we talk about diversity and inclusion. I have 2 daughters, so I do have some points of view, and I've spoken about that. So what I'll do is I'll give a bit of background so that you understand where I'm coming from, what I've experienced, and then some views that have been formed so far based on those experiences. And I would obviously invite questions, and more importantly also comments, because sometimes you listen to stories and some ideas come to your mind, and I would love to learn from all of you, whatever triggers come into your mind. And I'll try to do it briefly so that we have more time for Q&A. So just a brief background about myself. I was born on the day Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. there's this famous saying about a giant leap for mankind. So that's, so you can always Google search my birthday. So that basically makes me 50-year-old as of last year, because that was July 1969. My initial life was spent in a factory town. So my dad used to work in a fertilizer company called Fertilizer Corporation, public sector company. So we lived in Gorakhpur, a town in Uttar Pradesh, and 8 to 9 years I was there. Dad got promoted, came to Delhi, and then I spent the next 25 years living in Delhi, studying, and then working and so on. I was briefly in Singapore with Standard Chartered Bank for a year. In the last 15 odd years, I have been in Bangalore. So the question always asks about, where are you from? And my, most latest answer is that my dad continues to think that he's from UP, although he never lived there. He's now settled in Noida after working here and there, including in Kerala. I used to think I was from Delhi because that's where I spent 25 years of my life. But last 15 years, since my daughters think that they are from Bangalore, I now consider myself from Bangalore. So there is no route, so to say. I think where you are is where you are from. There's no going back anywhere. Now, in terms of education and work, Nirupama mentioned people in my generation had very limited choices, doctor or engineer. So I became an engineer, and then did an MBA, because at that time, again, either you went abroad and did higher studies if you were fond of engineering, and if not, then you had stayed back and did an MBA. And then I worked for a consulting company called Feedback Ventures, and then ICICI, lending money to people, and then in G Capital also in the same way. And then Standard Chartered Bank was where I started the offshoring operation or offshoring activity back in 2003, which is when I also left Delhi. And then I was in Dell, where I happened to get into the analytics area, which at that point in time wasn't very hot, but later it became quite hot. And now in Wells Fargo for the last 4 or 5 years. So some of the lessons from life are very interesting on who you are and what you become and why you become that. So many of the things that you become are more given by the circumstances, family, and so on. So the circumstance of my family was that my dad grew up in a rural village in UP, and went to some higher school in Banaras, which was the closest town over there. And he had a pretty difficult upbringing, but ended up getting into IIT Bombay. So this is one of those super 30 type of stories that you somehow land into an IIT or something. And the interesting thing is, and many things you learn later on, he learned English and Hindi both while in Bombay, because the only language he knew was Bhojpuri, which is the language spoken in Eastern UP. So anyway, that was his this thing. So of course, as you can imagine, the Super 30 story, that people with that background are really hungry to achieve, so to say. So that's what he was. He was always a go-getter, and did pretty well, even being, he got some scholarship to go abroad. And of course, parents said that, you've gone to Bombay, that's too far, you can't go abroad and all that. So of course, he worked in the government sector, which was considered safe. So he remained in that company, Fertilizer Corporation, till it actually fell sick and closed down. And then he changed his job and went to another company called Fertilizers and Chemicals Travancore FACT in Kerala. And then he retired from another company called Kripco back in Noida. So many of his decisions and his influences, and I'll talk about my mom also. Now you reflect and you see that it's all in you. So I think he was very sure that his two sons, which was me and my younger brother, had to go to IIT, because that is what had, I think, given him financial freedom, economic freedom, and so on and so forth. So he made sure that both of us were told that from a young age, and he would come home and teach us maths and science and all of that. And he ensured that his dreams came true for both me and my brother. And after that, he, of course, left us alone. My brother did not do an MBA and went to the US and stays there now. And I stayed back and did this. But the other interesting part, some of the interesting part is I used to study in a school called Modern School, Barakamba Road in Delhi. And those who are from Delhi would realize that that school is a bit of a snobbish school where people only from rich class go, and that's not the school which sends people to IIT. So the question I'm sometimes asked, why did your dad put you in modern school? That isn't the place which produces IT graduates. So the story goes is that when he was in IIT Bombay, there were 10 students from modern school Barakamba Road, and they spoke very good English. And therefore, my dad felt that maths and physics, I will teach the boy. But English, I think the school will be a good one to teach. So he would actually go to some of these schools and principals and tell them that, don't worry, my son is going to get into IIT. So it's your loss if you don't take him. Make sure that he learns English well, because that is something that I struggled with. So, sometimes many things that happen to you happen because of your father and mother. The mother side is interesting. She's been like, very came from a good background actually. My grandfather was a railway officer and had a good upbringing, but she was quite bindas, not the traditional mom that sometimes we see in the movie. She had no interest in religion or any kind of process and all. She was just a good person who would help people in need, and did not necessarily like my dad's enthusiasm to be a high achiever at any cost. Because he would always, take a transfer, take this promotion, get ahead in life and all of that. And she said, we are good without any of those things. So they were quite contrasting personalities at home. Like I said, many of these things you don't realize, but you reflect back. So while I think acquired some of these engineering and those types of qualities from my dad and then there, but the other part, the software aspect, in looking back, I think I acquired from my mom, saying I didn't necessarily have any goals to achieve. In fact, I don't think I ever got a promotion in most of the jobs that I was in, because I wasn't looking for it. In fact, many a time when the company was in difficulty, I'll tell my boss, I don't need so much money. My needs are very less. So if you have some money to distribute, let it go to other people. I need to have some good work so that I still feel satisfied. But money, after a few years, stopped being a motivator. Initially, it always is, because you have to have some basic, and then you realize that actually, if you don't need it, then why strive for it? So it was never a validation of my personality or well-being or whatever. I had other ways to validate myself. So I think because of that, I was quite okay in doing something good and not necessarily seeking something in return. So I think in some ways, I followed my mom in terms of, if my dad was a go-getter, she was a go-giver. And I think I became more like my mom in my attitude towards life than my dad, who still is very, very enthusiastic, and he still has to win at any cost. Anything that comes his way, he has to be number one, and he has to win, and he has to beat everyone else. And I have totally no such interest in winning anything at all. So that is some amount of background shape based on your family and your background and upbringing and so on, which, like I said, you don't realize these only when you reflect. And sometimes some of these talks are good reflection mechanisms for myself, and I think that's what happened. Now, what was this whole thing about career that I was talking about? So I think the best way to describe my view on career is that when 3 years ago, my daughter, so let me give a bit about my family and other things so that you get the context. So I have two daughters. The older one is just giving her exams in Christ College studying economics, and then she's got a job from campus in a company called Epsilon, digital marketing company. And she studied in National Public School NPS. And my younger one is studying commerce. She just got into 12th grade, both NPS kids. Since we came here, both kids, we live in Koramangala, and they have always been in NPS Koramangala. So that's been our life. So 3 years ago, I was asked to give some advice to the elder one to say, what should she pursue when she was getting into college? And that is when, and because, my wife said, you keep giving advice to everyone else, and it's important to give to your daughter as well. And of course, she was looking for advice on courses, on what course to follow, what electives to do, or what else to do. But I thought about it and said, let me come up with what I think I can tell her on what she should do as she enters college. And I came up with, as VMBAs, a 3C framework. In that 3C framework, MBAs are taught to create frameworks. They're also taught that the framework should ideally have, 3 letters, because 3 is easy to remember. They're also told that all those should be the same letter, because people forget unless it is ABC. So that's how 3C was born through my MBA education. But they were also created based on my own experiences on what I thought. And I used economics as a base to determine the framework, because my daughter was going to study. And I said, Pragya, I would say that what I have learned in my generation and what will happen in your generation is as under. And the 3C really is the 3 characteristics that you can acquire because those are the characteristics that will be in short supply and high demand. And as economic principles say, there's something which is in high demand and short supply is what you should acquire. So it was derived based on economic principles. So what were the three things which are and maybe in short supply, and if you acquire it, you can become better. So the first big trend that I saw was globalization in my generation, where my salary probably went 100 times from where I started off when I graduated from college. So whole globalization created a lot of benefit for a lot of us, but did not necessarily trickle down. And therefore, that whole inequality is giving rise to all these tension that we see. So I think my view is that the future belongs to deglobalization, because globalization has not allowed equality to follow, and this inequality is going to give rise to the new trend. So what will happen is deglobalization is that people will all look inward, whether it is nations, people, companies, everyone will become more selfish. Although you could argue that this is the time when we need more collaboration at every level, co-creation at a company level, collaboration at national level to solve global problems. But unfortunately, the reverse is true. And therefore, the quality that is, I think, in short supply and is probably in high demand is compassion, which basically means that you should be thinking more about others and not just about yourself. So that's the first C. The second one is really about choices that you make. So in our generation, we had, like I said, two choices. One of you either did not like or did not get. You got one, you were grateful. Engineering doctor, didn't like the maid, therefore took engineering. Colgate Forhans, you liked one, you didn't like the other. Lambretta Vespa, Fiat Ambassador, you either didn't get one or didn't like the other one. Happy to have the other one, and that was great. Life was so good. And now there are 100 axes for each, and on all those 100 axes, there are 100 choices. So there is no way that any choice that you make, you'll always feel unhappy, because there were a million others that were possible, and it'll appear that so what is in short supply then? I think that conviction and belief in your own self is in short supply. People tend to move from one to the other, not having a conviction of what they stand for, what they want to do, and move around. And that's okay for some time, but continually being that and never able to find a conviction is probably not a good thing. So that was the second C. And the third one really is that related to the trend that I've seen is my own life was all linear. Life was linear. I was in Six Sigma. If we did continuous improvement, we got ahead. So if you were Toyota and Ford and General Motors did not have a daily morning meeting to do continuous improvement, and you had on a daily basis, you can make some incremental progress in your company and culture and all of that, and you can beat the hell out of everyone else. And that's what Toyota did. But then Tesla came along and said that life is actually not so linear. And Amazon came along and said the same thing, and so did Google, and so did Facebook, and everyone else. So then this whole continuous improvement, which means it is a predictable linear life and you can get ahead, has given way to continuous reinvention. And therefore, you can't necessarily think linearly and predict the future and then be better at it. In fact, today, answering the question, where do you see yourself 10 years from now, is a hard one to answer, because life has become so difficult and also geometrically this thing. And I don't think human mind understands geometrical progression very well. We understand linearity because that's how millions of years of evolution has programmed us. So the last thing which is in short supply, I think, is creativity. So those were the three C's given to my daughter, saying, be compassionate, have a conviction on what you want to do, and be creative. And over time, I started sharing this with other people also. And then I realized that actually, there is a linearity in these three C's. So if you are actually compassionate and thinking about the whole wide world, it is quite likely that you will find your own conviction on where your position is and what you can do and what your contribution is. Because if you think broadly, hopefully you will get one. And by the way, if you did get those two, I'm quite sure you'll be quite creative in doing it, because that's now coming from inside, coming from a passion versus from the outside. So I felt that there was some kind of to use the analytical terminology, multicollinearity in these three C's. They were all connected to each other and one led to the other. And in sharing with many others, I realized that it's actually not just for my daughter. It's probably true for all of us. And maybe over time, I also realized that maybe I was just reflecting my own views of the world or what I was already pursuing. Because many a times, you come up with things that, you're biased towards your own self. And I felt that these are things that I actually stand for, and this is how I think about. And maybe I just, coincidentally reflected my own self into this framework and given to her. But long story short, that's what happened. 2 years later, I asked her, and she had forgotten. So what does daddy do when do you launch that product again with new features? That's what we have been told in agile methodology, that the product doesn't work, you add some new features, take customer feedback and launch it again. So those 3 C's actually became 5 C's, with 2 new C's getting added last year. Were really the first C was curiosity at the beginning and communication at the end. The thinking there was that to be able to be compassionate or any of those things, you have to be curious. You have to feel that you need to learn. And after being creative at the end, you better also communicate about it, talk about it, and hopefully that communication will fuel your curiosity, and that whole cycle will get completed. So that was the intent. My friends joke with me and say that, when next year you'll go back to Pragya and check with her, she'll probably have forgotten and we will see a 7C framework, but that's for later and we don't know. So that I would say to some extent that 5C is a reflection of my thought process on how the world is going to behave and how we could all deal with it and relate to it. So I leave that, career and life framework on one side and talk a bit about some of my ideas related to health and fitness. So like Nirupma said, I love marathon running. I started my first marathon when I came to Bangalore. I ran in 2005 with a bunch of friends. In fact, just for fun, we all dressed up as sadhus. So we were the most photographed people on that course, even more than the winner of the race, because the 6 people dressed up with big beards and sadhu dress running on the road. We came on TV and all of that, but that wasn't the intent. But after that, I continued to run marathon. So in fact, we also have a running group and we talk and run. So I call it a runversation because I enjoy talking, as you can see, and listening and learning from others. So the group actually has and 6 marathons that we think is or used to think was our Grand Slam. And they stand for Bangalore, Hyderabad, Ultra, Kaveri, Mumbai, Pondicherry, which is the acronym for Bhukamp. And I did my Grand Slam in 2014. And after that, I'm just doing 2 or 3 of them. I don't do all 6 every year. But there's a group, we meet in Common Park and we end with breakfast. So it's a nice community of people ranging from 21-year-olds to 61-year-olds and beyond, all with the passion of running and conversing, not a solo runner. So that's what I do. I love playing badminton. We have a group of friends doing that. Some of us do cycling. So I do enjoy all of these things, but I enjoy engaging and talking, and I'm not a solo person. So I think I've realized that on the health and fitness side also, one big element actually is heredity. So I actually have high cholesterol. I've always had, my dad had, and all of that. And you can't control that. So that part, I think one has to be just, aware of and make sure that you don't exacerbate a condition that you already have, because you can't do anything about that. But the other things that are, I think, in our control is that, and I again, for ease of remembering myself, I create frameworks for each of these things. So the health and fitness framework really is 1H and 3 E's, because then I remember the H is the heredity, but the E's are my mind, eating, exercising, and expressing. And expressing is really about thinking and how you think and your thought. A lot of people focus a lot on the second E, which is exercising. But I think the eating part is a much bigger part of anyone's health than the exercise. So a lot of people say, oh, you run 30 kilometers every Saturday, so you must be fit. And I said, frankly, I didn't run 30 kilometers before I was 35 years of age. And I was reasonably okay then. So I think eating is critical. Not overeating, eating the right kind of food. And somehow over time, I'm largely vegetarian. I became non-veg after marriage, but I'm not so fond of it. I eat it, but not so much. So no drinking, no smoking. Maybe my lifestyle was such that the eating was always under control. I don't necessarily thrive in eating. I do love sweets. That's the only thing I have. Yesterday, I ate the entire packet of Snickers. Before that, an entire packet of laddus. Before that, badamika. You give a sweet packet in front of me, it just gets over. So I compete with the kids, and mostly I win in eating all the sweets that come home. But that's the only thing I'm trying to see how to control it, although I don't have sugar. So I think eating, exercising, and expressing, having good thoughts, I think are to me, the mantras of health and fitness, 1H and 3. So, and the answer there is this, there's no one answer. With your own experiment, you can figure out the right method in the 3 E's that you have on how there are people doing intermittent fasting. There are people having 20 meals a day. On exercising also, you could be doing yoga, you could be doing running, you could be doing anything similarly for the other. So that's something that my view is. And by the way, this framework again came to me thanks to my daughter, because they called me in Christ College to give a talk, a TEDx type of a talk. So I take some of these opportunities because that allows me to reflect and come up with a framework. so this framework was born last year or the year before, whenever I gave that TEDx talk about 1H and 3s. The other topic, and this will be the last one, that I am a bit passionate about and have views on, is related to gender, because I've been engaged in diversity and inclusion type of activities in the company that I worked for. So there again, I think, I don't know when it was, 4 or 5 years ago, I was asked to share some views on that topic, and I obviously embrace such talks because that allows me to reflect and come up with some ideas on that. So the idea that I came up with, I'll briefly summarize on what I think about that. So my thought was that when we talk about gender and men and women and their equality in the society, and if we take a long-term historical view and actually take a overall, economic and social view on what each gender contributed to the society and what was the need of that society at that point in time, and therefore who contributed what. So my worldview has been that since the very beginning, there were hunter-gatherers where you had to hunt and get food. So the requirement of hunting was muscle power, and men were better at it. So they developed those faculties where you could hunt, run long distances, focus, kill, whatever, get the food. And gather women were more the tending variety. I mean, they had to take care of children, they had to take care of the berries, they had more spatial and more collaborative type of requirement in those societies. When the manufacturing, or after that, let's say when the other era came in, when there were wars and you had to grab territory, there again the men had to go out in the field and fight. So the muscle power was at a premium, because those who could fight will win the war and they will succeed, and that was the survival of the fittest strategy at that point in time. So again, men developed those faculties much better. Women, of course, stayed at home and enabled them to do all of those things. Similarly, when we came to the manufacturing era, which was the third era, the consumption needs of the society were material in nature. We wanted to consume cars and fridge and washing machine and all of those things. And the factories that were created required people to have a lot of muscle power so that they can, create those material goods which the society was looking to consume. So again, I think the physical progress which the men obviously had possessed over the 10,000 years of evolution was coming in handy. So I think now if I look at, and we look at beyond, the consumption pattern, 90% services and all of that is really cognitive in nature. I think the requirement to produce material goods is very small. Very few people need material goods, very few people are required to produce it, but a large majority of people are employed in services, and the consumption pattern has gone into services. Now, cognitive services require only your brain power, not your muscle power to succeed. Now, if you look at the brain power, it can be broken up into IQ and EQ. And IQ really is about, math, science, all that. And since I've been in school, and I think that holds true, girls have actually done better than boys. I mean, my class topper always was a girl till class 12. So they have always had better IQ. I mean, if you look at the test exam, and it's not just about India, I think it's true of the US as well. And in the IQ area, people don't even debate that women seem to possess that more. So the question can reasonably be asked to say that if the current consumption requirement is cognitive and not muscle power anymore, and women seem to possess both those ingredients, which is IQ and EQ, in better measure than men, then why are they complaining? They should actually be getting ahead of everyone else, and men should be asking for quotas, and women should be at the upper end. I think again, all of these are my own observation, and I wouldn't say there is any science in it. It's just hypothesis. I think there's a huge overhang from the past of who has dominated and who has created the success measures of a society. And the other more important thing is that I think women are those children who have to get distinction in all subjects, and men are like those children who want to just distinction in one, which is, let's say, maths. So even if you have superior raw material, but you want to get distinction in 5 things, it's not easy. But if you have low raw material, but you focus on one thing, you can beat that out of the other people. So to me, that probably explains the difference today, because women, again, historically have wanted to be a good mother, good wife, good everyone else, and played multiple roles and want to play all those roles to perfection. And many have said, I had to just hunt, I had to win a war, I had to make this factory product, and now I have to get that next promotion. So I will continue to choose one subject and become better. And I will always make a society which say that one subject has 100% weightage. All other subjects have low weightage. So I will always win because I have created a scorecard which has the weightage on the strength that I have. Again, like I said, I don't think anyone is conspiring to put the other people down, but I think the evolution has led to some of these phenomena, and it's important to recognize those phenomena. So what's the answer? I believe to me the answer is simple, that both the genders, and gender, like I said, people are different types, but let's assume that's how the gender is, right, can move towards the center a bit more. So what can men do? Men can say that, why do I have to be a single dimensional person? Can I not be a good brother, father, friend, many other things? Why should I have to live a very boring monolithic life that the only identity I have is my promotion and my salary and my car and my this thing? Isn't it so boring that you have just that one identity and none others? Why should women have the benefit of having 5 identities and not you? So think about it and develop more identities and not focus just on one. About women, I think when women are in office, especially in the this thing, they collaborate, they take leadership position, they delegate, and do a few things. But at home, they become an individual contributor. I have to do everything on my own. I have to do it well. That never works. As we see in organization, you are asked to delegate. You have to develop an ecosystem, develop collaboration. So even if you are at home, could you probably develop an ecosystem with your mother-in-law, husband, that neighbor who's a homemaker, that someone else, and house help, and so many. So why not try to become less perfectionist in your life and try to develop an ecosystem? And whenever there's an ecosystem, you have to live with some things which are not as good as what you would have wanted to be. That's how delegation works. So can you develop that perspective and do more and achieve more and have less stress by delegating more? So that's my view for gender equality that gets talked about, and how can we create a more equitable distribution. And I never say equal, because I think God has created two genders for a purpose, and they are all different and they have different strengths, and no one should ape the other. I think they should bring their own strengths. My personal view is that the world requires more what I would call women characteristics, because that's, to me, stands for more collaboration, more empathy, because the way the world is going, with the kind of politicians that are coming to power, we can see that, or at least that seems to be the case, that women seem to be more collaborative, and the women leaders, whether it is in New Zealand or anywhere else, seem to be taking a much more longer view, a more broader view of the situation than at least some of the men leaders that seem to have been elected, who are more short-termist and more aggressive and fighting with each other versus bringing people together. So I think we need more inclusion now than division, and it appears that the women are doing a better job on that front than the men. So I think I will pause here and remind you what I spoke about. 2-3 different things. One was about career and life, the 5C framework derived from my daughter's this thing on health and fitness, the 1H and 3E framework that I spoke about, and then about gender, my views on that topic. So these have been some of my learnings and reflections over the years, and this continues. I say that it's just half life over. I turned 50 last year, another half life left. So much more to learn, so much more to contribute, and so much to do. So I'll stop and let some of you maybe share your thoughts. If I have triggered some interesting thoughts, I would love to hear them. Or if you have questions that you want to ask, I'm happy to always answer questions. Nirupma?
Thank you, Mr. Pankaj.
Go ahead.
It's wonderful to have had such a beautiful conversation early in the morning. I'm Kirtana. So one of the thoughts that triggered for me, and I also wanted to ask you, was there's a lot of conversation about ikigai going around as far as making a career is concerned, right? There is no component of compassion in ikigai like there is in your 5Cs. But a lot of people are very enthusiastically putting their efforts into finding their ikigai. Do you think the compassion component is important to become a part of it, or do you think it's a different element by itself?
No, thank you. Great question. So, another thing that I need to tell about myself is that I don't read much. I'm a very poor reader. Most of my time is spent on listening and talking. So I don't read books. I don't even read the newspaper. I don't watch TV, and I think that whatever is relevant for me will come to me when required, and I don't need to seek it, and it does through my conversations. So, and by the way, I learned from someone long ago that there's a book called Tipping Point, which has someone called a connector, and I am that.
Yes.
Someone once told me that, by the way, there's a book called Go With Giver, which you talk about, and that is there. So many times I learn certain things which other people, of course, have written before, but I have not aware of it. So Ikigai is also has seen on some WhatsApp forwards. To me, I think what it is that, it's a Venn diagram where your passion and your what you want to do, everything comes together and all stars are aligned, and that's what you should do. And I think all frameworks are great. It is someone's worldview, and that's fine. But if you were to ask me how I think about what it is, to me it's quite in my mind at least very simple. What is it? Who are you, and what should you do? And the answer to me, and it's easier for me to articulate that way, is the Gita, to say you have to do your karma as per your dharma. Your dharma is your conviction, and your karma is what you do. So you can't have a dharma but no karma, and you can't have a karma without a dharma. So to me, it's simple. You got to figure out that C conviction after your compassion, and you just to be creatively pursue that and do it, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what anyone else says, and I mean it does matter because you will include. You have an ecosystem, and you do want to make sure that you are considering all their ideas. At the same time, you don't necessarily have to follow them. You can help them, and I think. I also think that when you follow your ideas with a very deep purpose, I think people actually support you. Many times when you are in doubt is when people make your doubts bigger. Is my perception. Many times there are people will say my boss is telling me this, or my mother is telling me this, or my mother-in-law is telling me this, and all that. And I said they are telling you because they see doubt in you. If they did not see doubt in you, they will not tell you anything. In fact, then they'll come and listen to you and they'll ask you. You seem to be very confident. Please tell me what I should do. So your doubt allows advisors to crop up and give you advice, because everyone loves it. Giving advice makes you on a higher pedestal. It actually gives you the confidence. So everyone is looking to give advice to feel better about themselves, not necessarily to help you. And that's just a subliminal thing. I don't think people are doing it in a negative way, but that's how it is. So I'm usually, I don't like to give advice at all, because I don't know who you are, what you do, what you should do. I can share only about myself and hope that it will trigger something in you for you to find what is right for you. Maybe I gave a long answer, and maybe I didn't answer the question, so you can ask it again.
No, it was perfectly fine. I just wanted to know what is your view on having something like that, and that came out perfectly in your answer. So I'm okay.
I'm just having buttermilk, just in case you are thinking this is my buttermilk.
And your stories had like great context and beautiful moments, funny moments, which thinking back, it happened with my family, with my parents as well, and now we are able to like laugh it off. As a teen, I was just like, why are you saying this? This is not supposed to be what you should say, and sort of a thing. And thank you for bringing that perspective to us.
Yeah, anyone is invited to a run in Urban Park on the weekend and breakfast, and we do conversations. Sometimes walk sessions are fine as well.
That's lovely. Probably I'll join you soon.
Hi Pankaj, this is Manoj here.
Yeah,
Put
Manoj.
on the video.
Oh.
Easier to cut.
I am on low bandwidth. As soon as I put it on, it'll not work.
That's okay.
So Pankaj, I don't have a question, but I have a very connecting incidents to narrate. Before that, just to give context to people who are not from Delhi, people who have not seen modern school Barakamba. This is a 25-acre school in the heart of the city, and that's the only school in Delhi which has a playground that you would envy if you look at it. So that's the connecting point that I have. So obviously, I didn't go to that school, but I went to a school in East Delhi. Okay, and during my stay in my school, post my 10th grade, we had 3 cricket matches with modern school Barakamba, and one doesn't need to explain who came out the winner. Of course, it was modern school which came out the winner, and every time we used to go back, our principal used to ask us, because she was somebody very passionate about cricket, and she used to ask us, why do you think we lost? And every time, people would give different answers, and answers could be as silly as that, we didn't have good bats. The highest scorer would be the person who scored about 15 runs, all of them behind the wicket. So people who understand cricket, it means they've just edged the ball. Obviously, we all knew the team was so superior. So when I was in 12th grade and I was the captain and I was supposed to answer this time after losing to my principal, I was thinking I need to come up with a new reason, because telling them they have a better field, we've got a 30-yard boundary, they've got a 50-yard boundary, they have a better coach, all that won't sell. And I kept thinking, and when I entered the principal's room, she asked me, Manoj, so you went there now. This is the third time you went with the team, and this time as a captain. Why do you think you lost? I said, I think, ma'am, they had better shoes. So what I meant was, for different things, people would keep giving different reasons. But I feel there are times where you have to acknowledge the other person has done more hard work. It's not because of the ground that they are better. It's about the passion that they feel about that sport. Which maybe we didn't have it at that level. Maybe yes, their coaching was better, their equipment would have been better, but I could have that connect. And just to complete the context, so Ad Astra has always had their office in Connaught Place. So we used to be in Tolstoy, on Tolstoy Marg, if you would remember, the parallel road to Barakamba.
Yeah.
It cuts across. Not the parallel, it cuts across Barakamba. And we are in Prakashdeep building, and from the terrace you could see the entire Barakamba school. So for me, who's very passionate about cricket, used to be that one ground where we couldn't win ever. And by the way, we were the best team, what you classically called East Delhi or Jamna Par, So I thought I'll just share that incident with you.
Yeah, Delhi is another place which has its own class system. And the size of your house, the locality you live in defines who you are. So yeah, we have experienced all of that in those 25 years. So, but I think many a times some of these things are also driven by, perceptions. Many a time, you are also in awe of some other competitors, and sometimes you have mentally lost it without you realizing it. And I wouldn't know, Manoj, whether that was true in this case or not, but many a time, there is it's like the Lagan team that, you could be in awe of the other competitor just looking at from the outside. They appear to be confident and all of that. They may or may not be, and sometimes you have lost the battle mentally. And those are some of the things that one realizes later on. And I'm aware of a NGO over here in Bangalore, Parikrama, and a few others, Dreamer Dream. Their belief is that in schools, and they go to government schools and underprivileged schools, and their focus is on teaching them cricket and football. And they make these, underprivileged kids play those matches with kids from international schools and public schools to develop the confidence that, you can win against these guys in football. You can win against them in any other field as well. So that, I think, is another thing that I have learned. And I want to Parikrama football matches also, playing with these kids. Sometimes they call older people like me also for some celebration matches. But I think the underlying philosophy is that believe in yourself. Like I said, come back to it, saying don't just get overawed by someone's outer appearance. Not to say that you should not prepare, but many a times I think focusing inward is better than just looking outward.
Hi, Pankaj. I have a few reflections too from what both of you have said. Since I've known Manoj now for close to 10 years, he's been with us. As a young lad, he came and joined us. Manoj, I'm not trying to praise you here. I'm just trying to, being honestly, I'm trying to reflect. So whenever I was in the Barakamba office, now I know why Manoj is to say Malutte. That's the modern. Now I know what I mean. He never told me he failed in cricket all the time. He used to always tell me, all the politicians go there and, and we work with the Dalmias. So he studied there. So he used to tell me Abhishek studied there. A lot of stuff about modern school. Now I know where it is coming from. But what I perhaps Manoj has not reflected upon is when he was in the ground, he couldn't win over them. But being a spectator from the office, he's become such a big winner. Maybe, he needs to think about what triggered that. He's been such a phenomenal professional within the organization. from the age of 26 to now, he's really grown step by step from being a consultant. He's become a head of a particular branch, and he supports on other industry segments and on the RPO services. So what I noticed is that I know he felt the other person had a shoe, but I really think joining here, initially used to say this is not possible. I can't do PD. I can't manage a team, make somebody else the center head. I can't do this. And same with Saurav, the guy who heads my Calcutta office, although he's a man of few words. So both of them had a similar kind of a thing saying, how can I do that? And it's not possible. And all that you have to do is to know it's okay if you fail. Just go ahead and do it. And I'm sure now when he looks at Barakamba, he can have good thoughts about how think about it very differently, saying it's just how you view it. I think and the more wins he had, the more successful he became, because like you said, you put it so beautifully. I like the way you described your dad and your mom. It went back to me looking at life, because both my mom and dad never put any pressure on us. We never ever, and we are all three of us, my brother Jayanti, who's on the call, myself, we're all very self-made, no pressures at all. We just built. They said do what you want. There was no pressure during exams. All that they would do is to bring porridge in the middle of the night to give it to you to study. So nobody ever wanted you to be number one, number two, but we all become what we are today. And the way you put across very succinctly, saying, how you need to go from backwards, how communication, curiosity would come first, because the more curious you are, then you realize what you need to do in life and you want to learn. And therefore comes creativity, conviction, and of course, compassionate is overwhelming on all of it. And I like the way you put it across. And I'll remember this acronym because it's very, the 3 C's to 5 C's. I think you said you learned from your daughter the 2 other C's. I learned all the 5 from both of you. I think it's the way you put it across that stays in the mind. Many a times, like you said, it's not advisors what you need. When you are saying something in us triggers. I think, and we realize that, how we need to kind of, if I can say, sculpt ourselves.
Yeah.
In different ways, and that is with us, like you talked about karma and dharma, and I like the way you said eating, exercising, and expressing. I'm not so good at I'm not good at it. That's some area I need to really improve upon, but I like the IQ and the EQ bit also. Fantastic way, the way you put it across, saying, from the beginning the boy is always given a car to play with, and the girl is given a doll with play. It's the upbringing. And overall, and each family could be very different from that. But what ultimately works is that women becomes more compassionate, largely because of the upbringing and also because of the role he or she takes. And you gave the example of a New Zealand prime minister, and if I can say, as opposed to the American president at this point, but without having to compare anybody, there have also been fantastic men who have also been very nurturing, and most of the Swamijis have been men who are compassionate. If I have to quote Vivekananda and others, who all believed in first compassion and then bringing people together, which is more important than anything else. And to me, just to kind of summarize, this COVID situation has been a great reflection to go back to life, to see you don't know whether you'll be alive tomorrow. And the situation is such that even your family member would not be there if you're dying around. If the situation worsens in India, which happened in Italy, Spain, and a few other countries. So therefore, you don't know how your future is going to be. So the here and now, you live well, and like you said, while you advise others, if you feel good about it, but ultimately, it's all about how you run your own marathon. If I can look at it, so if you will make mistakes. In coaching, we call it break in transparency. You make mistakes again, but again you attempt to do it again. You attempt to do it, so that the more you fail, the more you attempt, and that happens because you're curious. Is what we learned, and you summarized it beautifully. I would want a lot more to say, but I'll restrict it because there are lots of people out there who want to kind of talk to you. We can always talk off the session. So I will leave it to others to ask you questions. But thank you very much. I think it brought in a lot of my own childhood and life into the whole perspective. Thank you so much.
Very nice. Thank you. Jayanti, you are on mute.
Sorry, you knew I was talking. Okay. First and foremost, I wanted to reflect on and points that I could relate and for which I have great respect. Um, I've been blessed. I consider myself blessed. Like I keep meeting at least 3 or 4 people in a day, and from completely different backgrounds. These are new faces to me. So, plethora of people I get to meet. But I think on all in our mind we have respect for people on what they speak. And for me, my topmost thing is individuals who have respect for their parents. So it was such a nice way you started, and it is there in you, so you are not making it up. It was that it's not even passion, it's just it's like a blood flow in your thing. You're so proud of what your parents are. One thing I noticed is you spoke about your dad, you spoke about your mother. One has a giver, one has as a go-getter. What I didn't find was there was no but when between the two. So you accept both of them as what they are. You're not saying your dad was. There is no up and down in your head. It's equal. Not using a but, I think, is a very beautiful thing. That means that you respect both of them and you take them for what they are. So that, I think, sort of skewed my thinking towards listening to what you would say next, because I really have respect for people who respect their parents. For us, my dad used to be really fun loving. All the reading we started, I think I was in my 5th standard when I did my first perimezan. He used to read a lot, so forever. That's how we picked up reading, and so many books we keep reading. My mom used to be very innocent, but she had a task on hand that she had to bring us up, and that was her life. So whatever we are today, we owe every bit to her. There were so many ups, there were so many downs that she has taken, but she doesn't know anything else except that she has to look after us. So she's a very, very selfless person. Talking about, I don't know why the modern school has triggered so much. So I didn't know whether it was, so I'll tell you, everybody has told you our office was on Tolstoy Mark, and the nearest hotel was Hotel Ashok. And I'm a very nature loving person. So I'm up at 5:30 in the morning, and I look outside the window with the dove which used to sit on my window. And modern school was the one which was opposite. If it rains, I used to go see how that building was. And early morning there used to be exercises, activities, playing. Horse riding used to be there, I remember. So I learned from Manoj that was a school, and it's modern school. Very curious to know what statistics say about what those kids become in their lives, if not the IITs though. Talking about school, so nice to see a thinker like you after having come from modern school. We all came from ordinary schools, but I think we had a very competitive edge. Getting a first, second rank was very important. Forever, I used to be at the second rank or the first rank. And getting into a good college, everything was so competitive, and you thought that was the world. And to start thinking, to be empathetic, to be what you are without worrying about the result and enjoying the moment is something I learned from my daughter. But she went to a school that only thinks, and they don't compare, they don't compete. She went to Rishi Valley. I think most of us in the house learned a lot of things from her. We didn't know what not winning meant in life, but we learned from those kids. When we used to go watch their sports, there is no winning. There was no prizes that were being given to the kids. And then for people like us, like what we are discussing now, we always think it's mediocre. I used to head private banking for Societe Generale based out of Singapore. And you know how in the banking community, everything is result oriented. Everything is about a word, a letter, if you're uttering, it has to be bringing you 10x back, is the type of world that we come from. And from there to say that it's okay not to be so worried about the result, but to enjoy the journey. It takes a lot of change. It's a paradigm shift for oneself within one's mind to come to that. But yeah, we have been able to come, and now we can have conversations what we would have called 10 years back as, you know, conversations, discussions without any results. But what we don't realize is it triggers our thought process, and that's where I think the seed is sown to be to discover what you are. I think that's a very, very important thing. I'm so happy this conversation is happening. Uh, though in the beginning it looked like, where are we getting? And then you realize that, okay, all of us are talking, right? It has triggered that thought. And I think none of us have prepared. We are all talking about whatever happened and picking up topics from the discussion and taking it forward. Thank you so much for it, and I'm sure we'll have more questions and answers. I'll leave the time for others for their questions.
No, I really liked that observation of your about my speaking about my parents. I didn't think of it that way, although I do feel that way. But it was quite astute of you to pick that up. I didn't know that. On the school side that you mentioned, where do modern school kids go? I think we judge schools based on the size of the campus, and Manoj mentioned 25-acre or whatever, and maybe the English-speaking prowess. I was reminded of this movie called Hindi Medium, or what was that, English Medium. So I think we judge more by the outside appearances, which we don't realize. And they could, I never belonged there actually. I had a very small group of people in that school. So I couldn't relate to anything that Manoj spoke about because I never played anything over there. I was busy preparing from IIT because my dad was saying, how's your maths doing and all of that. While people over there will go to Machan restaurant to spend money, my dad would drop me on a scooter, while over there, I think everyone had fancy cars and people were from very rich backgrounds. At the same time, it never, now I realize, never made me envious of anyone's riches. Because I was a good student and a lot of respect was given to me. Many parents used to call me home because they felt their children will have good company. And some of those things I realized much later. So therefore, I never felt, ashamed of not being in a rich family while being in the school where everyone was very different. So like I said, I never felt that I'm a modernite, as they would call it. I mean, like I said, I was there. I learned a lot. But it wouldn't say that I would identify with most of the people, 95% of the people, because they were the Rahul Gandhi, Priyanka Gandhi, Arun Nehru, their children, a lot of politicians, businessmen. There were quite a few good friends of mine who were from the civil services and all of that as well. So there was a big variety, but no one from poor backgrounds. It was a rich people's school, really. And therefore, I think I like Rishi Valley very much. We went there to a run in Horsley Hill with the alumni who's part of our group, and we stayed at the campus. We spoke to some of the teachers. So I really like the Rishi Valley way of thinking. But in today's day and age, sometimes people worry about those idealistic ways because you have to earn a living. So that's why I like my dad, who was very forceful in making me economically independent so that I can be myself, which is what my mother's side was. So I needed that, on top of which I could then express myself. But if you are, starving and don't have a living to make, then all the idealistic ideas that you might have may not be able to fructify. So I look at both of them as two important parts of my upbringing. One giving me the economic independence and the confidence of being who I am, and the other allowing me to explore on that pedestal and not worry about a downside.
Hi Pankaj, this is Amrita here. I can draw a lot of parallels from you. First of all, like Nirupama said, I'm one of the few, I can't say a marathon runner, more of a half a marathon runner. I've done many half marathons. I haven't had the courage to go to the complete marathon. A lot of parallels. My father was in the army, so we, being South Indians, were born, brought up in the north, and considered ourselves North Indians for a long time. I was in Delhi for a short time. Also studied in a school called Loreto Convent. When dad was in the army, mom had a big fight. I still remember saying, why can't we go to army public school, which is free? And dad insisted on putting us in Loreto for the same reason your father had said, like, we are better English speaking, better performers. We never understood, and both parents argued, but at the end we did come out, and like Nirupama and Jayanti, we are all today, three of us, my sisters and myself, are what we are because of our parents. So yes, a lot of us, I'm sure in this group, have to thank our parents for what they have made, the sacrifices they've made, and for us today, it's much easier. As you said, our earning capacities are so much more. And we don't, to send a kid abroad or to let them follow their passion, like you can tell your child today, follow your passion, do what you want, because they don't have to worry about anything, any financially, they don't have any liabilities. We are not going to be liabilities on them. Whereas our parents, for them to tell us, girls, go out and follow your dreams, was a tough one, because they came from a generation where they believed girls should get married and, settle down, have children, look after in-laws. But for them to step out of the box and say, no, you follow a career, you don't worry about this thing, you do what you want and we'll support you, was a very big deal. And I never realized it till I actually became a parent myself. What I liked about you, this thing is your advice you gave your daughters, one of the C's, creativity. I'd love you. I mean, I want to know more about it, because see, when you say creative, people tend to think only artistic people are creative. It's like, so a lay person says, how can I be creative? So Pankaj, I really want you to describe how a person can use his creativity at work. What would you, if you could expand on that?
Yeah, and I will answer that, and I'll also tell you another incident that comes to mind about um, something else I'll talk about. One of my first bosses said something we met recently, because you reminded me of him, and maybe because he's a Mallu. So we'll talk about that as well. So when I look at creativity, I think it's in the education system. So historically, I think we all knew what was required. We knew we need cars and all of these software production. So the education system was born to feed the industrial revolution, because the industrial revolution needed all of us to consume some products, hardware, which were very definitive in nature, and you knew, what was required, and you had to just somehow make it, whether it was Ford motor car or anything else. So the focus was on solving problem, on creating something, a standardized product. So my personal belief, again, as I spoke about the future need being cognitive in nature and not industrial, to me, the 20 years of school and college, if you were to ask me, is a total waste the way it is today organized, because those 20 years was created to feed a factory, because the factory needed a standardized input to create a standardized output. When the output is not standardized anymore, you don't need a standardized input, and you don't need that 20 years that we are making, live with for the last 100, 150 years, because the world has moved, the cheese has moved, and we haven't changed the ingredients. But that's a different topic altogether. But in a short way, I would say that defining the problem rather than solving it is, to me, creativity. So I keep telling people, if I was a maths teacher, I will give a 3-hour exam and I'll say, tell me 5 problems, Amrita, that you think are worth solving using your mathematical knowledge. And now please go and solve it. So depending on my mood, I can judge, put 50% weightage to the choice of your problem and 50% to the solution, or whatever that might be. Today, the first one doesn't get any weightage at all. The teacher decides what you need to solve. My view is solution space is now getting commoditized. AI, machine learning, everything, they will automate and solve any problem that you can think of. Some of you who are related to the data analytics space should check out a website called Kaggle, Kaggle, kaggle.com, old website. So you can just pose any problem, and there'll be someone who will solve it for free. So I keep telling, when I was in the analytics field, I would tell some of my folks that, I don't need you, Amit. I can just pose this problem on Kaggle, and some Hungarian scientist in his free time can solve it for free, better than you. So why do I need you to solve the problem? You tell me what is worth solving. And that is where I don't think we have developed the faculties to determine what is worthwhile, what should we do, what should I do? What should the company do? What should my function do? What should I do tomorrow? We are so programmed to follow orders. Because when I got 100 in max marks, my dad was very happy. He never worried what questions I was solving and whether that question was worth solving at all or not. So to me, that is creativity. That if you are compassionate and you are convinced, then whatever you do, I think hopefully will be creative. And creative, I define my definition of creativity. One is defining the problem. The other is that the world is non-linear and multidimensional. So earlier, if it was linear, that continuous improvement, running the marathon slowly, you can win the race. But now you're playing multiple roles. So if I look at it from a capability perspective in the company, I tell people that to be creative, you ought to know Six Sigma, which is process improvement linear. You need to know design thinking. You need to know AI, AML, blockchain. So now you are using a Swiss knife and not a knife anymore. So the linear world required a knife of Six Sigma, but the continuously reinventing world requires a Swiss knife, which has many, many capabilities, and you need to figure out which one and which combination to use in which order. So to me, those are my views of creativity, defining it and then solving it in multiple different ways, which wasn't possible before.
Thanks, Pankaj.
But if you allow me, let me talk about Hari Nayar's interaction with me a month ago. So Hari Nayar used to be my first boss in my first job, and we ended up meeting some time ago because some other friends had come back. So he's an interesting chap. He runs a company called Holiday IQ, which I think he just sold off to make my trip last year. And we were again, when old people meet after a long time, we talk about life and what we learned and all of that. And we were talking like this, and he said, human beings need some constancy. We want to hang on to something, So in the past, when the world was not changing very fast, we could hang on to so many things. We could hang on to our jobs, to our identity, and many of those things. But now with everything changing, we were determining, so what is it that will remain constant? Because, you do need something to hang on to as human beings. And, religion has been a great force for people to hang on to and hung by that as well. So the belief that we came up with, that there are two things that we think will remain constant. One is the purpose and the other is the identity. And purpose was, someone spoke about ikigai, is really your dharma, that you need to figure out what that is. And the same for the company. Are you in the business of mobility or in the business of making car? Apple is in the business of challenging the status quo, not. And if you have heard the golden circle of Simon Sinek, very famous TED speaker, he talk about the what, how, and why, and he gives the example of Apple and Dell, and he says Dell is a great computer making company. That's what they stand for. Apple is a company which stands for challenging the status quo. So you will even buy a car from them, but you won't buy a car from Dell. So what is your identity? What is your purpose? And those types of things are important, and that is what will remain constant. The identity question was very interesting, and that was actually Hari's interpretation. And he said, your identity is not what you think you are. The identity is what others think you are. And he gave the example that, he's a Malayali, of course, Hari Nayar. He lived in the Middle East. He was in Delhi when I used to work there, and now he's settled in Bangalore. So he said, my two sons have all gone to international schools, and one of them is now studying in Netherlands. And he said, my boys think that they are global people. They don't like the identity of either Indian or Malayali or Bangalore, I think. So right now, many of the kids don't want to be judged based on those narrow, identifications of race, religion, creed, color, anything. They just think they are global citizens, and that's a nice ideal to have. And he said when his son went to Netherlands, he was the only one Indian boy in his class. And everyone said, oh, so you are Hindu and you are Indian and you are from Kerala and all of those types of things. And his boy had never thought of himself in those terms. But he said, now the identity is something that others assign to you. You don't have a choice. I looked at you, I said, Menon, Mallu. Even if you don't feel you are a Mallu, the identity is given to you. You don't have a choice. So I think
coincidentally, I'm not a Malayali. I'm married to one. I'm a Bangalorean.
Okay. But like I said,
so you made me a Malayali, and a lot of people do that.
Yeah, and we all do that because that's how it is, and these are also prejudices that we carry. But that is such is life. That's how we think. That's how we behave. And those prejudices have had some historical meaning, but those things are changing very rapidly. So the point really is that what identity do you carry? And these days, and I think someone spoke about people going abroad. These days, if you don't have a US passport and you're an undergrad student, I think my view is you will have a tough life. I tell all my friends, why do you want to spend $80,000 per year, 2 crore rupees for 4 years of education with very risky ROI? Most likely your kid is going to come back and look for a job here. and you will be down with 2 crores. And if you have 10 and you want to spend 2, that's fine. But if you have only 1 and you are borrowing another 1, then maybe that's not fine. So I think some of those things about identity will also become important on where do you belong, who do you think you are, and those things I don't think the next generation um, is really thinking about. I don't think our kids are thinking about it. My wife and I did a thought experiment with our elder daughter, with whom we keep doing experiments. And we said, my wife is from Lucknow. Lucknow is a place which is fraught with all these Hindu-Muslim issues. And we said, we told her, imagine you are in Lucknow and there's a Hindu-Muslim riot happening and you are running and you see a Hindu and a Muslim. Who will you seek help from? We're just trying to test her own identity of who she thinks as a religious person, if at all. We all know that kids don't relate to religion at all, and neither do I. And she said, she looked at us as if, what kind of a crazy question are you guys asking? Don't you have anything better to do? And then she said, how will I know whether someone is a Hindu or a Muslim? I said, okay, smart question. Yeah. We said, okay, the Muslim guy is wearing a skull cap and the Hindu guy is wearing some red robe or whatever, so it will be very obvious. So, okay, she said, you guys are not giving up. She said, okay, I'll seek help from the guy who's more friendly. So clearly, she didn't want to narrow herself into a religious identity to seek help from someone who's like her. She said, no, I will go with the friendly guy. That's really, if you are really compassionate and that's the world you have, that's fine. But the real world, we all know, does not behave that way. Definitely not in smaller towns and cities. They might behave in this way, and they don't behave in that way when you are in stress. Look at what is happening in America. So the world will go through ups and downs, and your identity will come to the fore. And you might be told that you are black or a Muslim or Hindu supremacist or a white supremacist or whatever that is. And you won't have a choice. You will be seen as what your caste is, what your skin color is, what your nationality is. And you might choose to say that I don't relate to them. But that choice you unfortunately will not have. So to me, I think that was a great realization talking to Hari that day, that your own purpose, which is your own dharma, and your identity, which is by the way assigned by other people, and you need to be aware of that and be ready to accept it and not fight it and say, why are you thinking I'm this and that? But that's a big thing. So another trigger thought I'll share.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, Pankaj.
Hi.
Thank you for taking time out and giving us a perspective about life, and it's very interesting. So I have some questions. I think this is very fascinating to know the 5 C's and 3E framework. So my question is about the 3 E's: the effectiveness and efficiency and the experience. So what is your, how do you define effectiveness and efficiency? And the second part of the question is the productivity. So efficient people are more productive irrespective of the job? Uh, are they cope up with any kind of job? It's a wrong job, or it's whatever given the job, so they will do efficiently, uh, or is there any take you will I just wanted to know your perspective about this concept.
Yeah, and I just realized that my 3 is in the office, which is effectiveness, efficiency, and experience, are coincidental with my 3 on the health and fitness, which is eating, exercising, and expressing. So I will remember that now. So the office 3 E's really are, the discussion these days are, and mostly to me, life is becoming much more multidimensional and not or. So when people say, should I do this? Both revenue and profit, not or. Now the question is, you will obviously never have it all. So the question is, you have to figure out what is the right balance. So let me give you an example. Think about hiring employees. I mean, you guys in the hiring people, think about hiring and onboarding employees as a process, right? Think about efficiency, effectiveness, and experience. So many times, to be able to give a great experience to someone by giving them flowers or this, that, you might have to spend money, in which case it will appear that you are compromising on efficiency, because efficiency is all about saving money and saving cost. Effectiveness is all about a business like ours, which is into banking, effectiveness, which is very important, because we don't want to on efficiency, because we have let's say we have a risk management department whose job is to make sure that we don't make mistakes and we take care of all the risks. And that department is very critical in a banking environment, not so much in, let's say, other companies. So those things make us more effective. And therefore you have to balance how much, so by the way, in our company, we have too many risk people. People are saying, looks like we have over-invested in that effectiveness. And maybe we need to become slimmer and smarter and all of that. Experience is, like I said, all about what the customer cares about. So I think if you are running a company, all three are important. And in that context, you have to figure out how much of what you need, because it is always a trade-off. In life, it's all about trade-offs. It's not about either or. You cannot give up one for the sake of another. You will always say, how much am I giving up for how much of the other one? And what is the best trade-off? And that trade-off sometimes is very personal at an individual level. And also at a company level. Different companies will have different risk appetite. So if I am in banking, banks are supposed to have a risk appetite statement. So we will have a risk appetite statement as Wells Fargo. JP Morgan will have a different appetite statement. It's almost like, we are willing to take so much risk because we believe that we can manage that risk and get a good return. Someone can take a higher risk. There are non-banking finance companies who are designed to take higher risk. They can therefore get better return. Just like within our bank, the consumer business, the consumer lending, when we lend to people, we take higher risk, but we generate higher return. So I think in any context, this effectiveness, efficiency, and experience are the three tripods, tool levers. And you have to figure out how to balance and what balance is appropriate for you. And in the same company and in the same situation, two people could come up with different ways of thinking about it. And I don't think there is one right answer. But I would say that it's important to think about all three.
Thank you. So I just little emphasis on and effectiveness and efficiency. So effectiveness and efficiency, what I used to think it's bit it's same thing. So do you think what is the fundamental difference between both?
I think these semantics can have many different meanings. I'll tell you my meaning. So it's different between a Korean car and a German car. So one is very efficient. The other is more effective. That will break down less frequently. That's my definition. But like I said, you could have any definition that suits you. So as you see, the German cars are very sturdy. They'll go for 1,000,000 miles without any breakdown. But the Japanese and the Korean, now they become better, are supposed to be very efficient, cheaper, more this thing, and will give good fuel efficiency, but might break down earlier. So again, it depends. There are enough people who will want to buy a German car. There are people who buy this. So it depends on your positioning, your market, your perception of what you want to be. Like I said, there is a room for everyone. You have to define your market and your segment and play in that market. You shouldn't create a German car to sell in the Japanese market or vice versa, because that won't work.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, sir. This is Dipanita. So I would like to have your inputs on two of my queries. One would be like education background has always been a key parameter for people getting employed with larger branded or best place to work kind of organizations. Now in today's time, like organizations are moving to a leaner organization structure. So instead of 50 employees, they are hiring 10 with a background of premier institutes. So for those individuals who have not been able to achieve that kind of a degree from premier institutes due to financial or personal constraint, what should they do to survive such challenges? That would be my one query. Other one would be how important is being competitive, or it is at all important?
Yeah. So the first one is really what the relevance of education in the outcomes that you create in your job or in the marketplace. I think if you were to ask me today and in future, the relevance of the education that has been there, and it's been there for a long time, is going to diminish. And the diminishing will happen, I think, in my opinion, because of two different factors. One factor is, like I said, a lot of things that are being taught today are probably not as relevant. And the pace at which the world is changing, the education is also becoming obsolete. So earlier, going to an IIT or Harvard or whatever was a signal that you are the best, or you are smart, or whatever that is. But what is happening is that the education's half-life is changing very fast. Whatever you learn will dissipate very quickly, and unless you are a continuous learner, you can't survive. We all know that if the world is changing very fast, you have to show that you are a continuous learner, not that you pass the exam one time and you were smart once upon a time. So that educational degree is unable to signal a continuous learning attitude. And people will find out that, if you're not a learner, and if you just passed Harvard or IIT once upon a time and after that stop learning, then you're not going to be useful. The other factor is that there are enough things happening digitally and online that there are validations happening. So today in the data analytics field, you could have been a failure in all your exams, but if you are a Kaggle top 10, that holds more water than an IIT degree. So people, if you were to say that, and I'm just taking an example of data analytics and Kaggle because I'm familiar with that, people actually, when their CV on the top will write, I was a Kaggle top 10 in 2019. They will get a job. We have heard of examples where Google and Amazon, who have these vast platforms in which a lot of students are doing coding and programming and all that, people from no-name colleges have gotten offers to go to the US and work because those companies have been able to see the performance of those students on their platform live and say, oh, these guys are finding the maximum number of bugs. They are creating some program that no one in other places. So I think the digital nature of the emerging society will provide many new data points for people to judge your effectiveness than that one education degree at the end of age of 21 that you were required. I'm not saying that's going to go away tomorrow, but like I said, there are enough things for me to believe that the future will belong to a lot of validation elements, which will come from many different sources and which will be available because of a digital world. And that one degree value will continue to be, going down. Like I said, these brands created over tens of years doesn't go down very quickly, but its relevance will go down. Even today, when we are hiring, I think we all go to good colleges and all of that, but we are also seeing so many other people who don't have that, but they are able to show their success very quickly. And people are getting picked up over there. In fact, one of the projections I was making to someone was that today we have been, giving a lot of points to company loyalty, because loyalty was an expression to say that you stayed with the company. And it took a while for you to demonstrate your prowess in a company. If you were in the automobile industry, you had to spend 10 years to be relevant. If you were in some other industry, it took some year. Now with everything being software, you can make a big impact in a quarter. You don't need 5 years to make an impact. So I was telling someone that 10 years from now, maybe when I look at a CV and if someone has changed 10 jobs in 10 years, I'll actually hire him versus someone who stayed in the same job for 10 years, because it is highly likely that you may not have gotten the same opportunity to learn and contribute in the same company than what you would have by changing job. So to me, I think people are wanting people who are able to make an impact. And the educational degree, the time spent in the company, loyalty, all of those were surrogate measures. And those surrogate measures were relevant in the linear, slow-moving day. In the geometrically moving, fast-moving days, those measures will disappear and new measures will take over. And those will be digital measures which will come into being. So again, like I said, we were a bit futuristic, but I do think that's where we are headed, and some of these elements will go down. So I would think that someone who does not have a good degree is probably much better off today than they were 5 years ago, because they will have more opportunities to leapfrog and get ahead of the others. And like I said, this whole continuous reinvention is also an area where companies are able to leapfrog, individuals are able to leapfrog. And in the past, it was a linear world. It was very difficult to leapfrog. So I think there are more opportunities now than ever before because of the leapfrogging mentality, the continuous reinvention. You can make a Flipkart in 10 years and retire at the end of 10 years. You can do many other things in 3-5 years, which was just not possible in the past. And what was the second question? Should you be competitive or not? See, competitive is a very, it depends on what competitive means. If I look at myself, I am not competitive in terms of getting a promotion, getting ahead, beating someone or whatever, but I'm very competitive in becoming better myself. So I love to compete with myself and become better. I derive inspiration from other people, but I'm not looking to beat them, because somehow I think they are in their own game. They are running their own marathon. I don't know what the marathon is. So there's no point in competing with them in bits and pieces where I have no idea what race they are running. So why would I want to do that? But I would want to take some snapshots from their experiences and use that to inspire myself. So that's how I look at my own view of competitiveness. But there are people who get inspired by, beating someone else. And not that I don't. I'm running a marathon. Sometimes I'll feel very tired, and then I see someone running in front and say, "Let me beat this fellow." And once in a while, it's fine. But so I think as long as that competition is to inspire yourself, it is good. But if the competition tends to become to put someone down to become better, that is bad. I would think that the other fellow should become even better so that can derive more inspiration. But sometimes the competition can become destructive when you are not improving yourself, but you are putting someone else down. That is the harmful, negative way of interpreting competition, in my personal opinion.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nirupama, you're on hold. You're on mute.
Are we done or any more questions? Bunisha, you have something?
That's it. First of all, thank you for the session. I'm just thinking like might be we actually told till 10, but because it was such an interactive session, everybody come up with the thoughts because they were able to relate whatever you said. I know Pankaj from I think almost more than a year now. He's been a great mentor to me, and I'm really thankful to him, like because he was always there whenever I had any confusion. I really missed our meet because of this COVID. I don't know next when we will meet up, like we'll meet in person. So thank you so much, Pankaj. Like I asked you, and then you actually spared time from your busy schedule for this session. Thanks a lot.
I also learn from these, as you can see.
So Pankaj, thank you very much. I think you started the morning so well, and I'm sure the year ahead for most people would be to kind of reflect upon their own lives. I think that's what you touched to me, honestly. I think very aptly you said you don't like to give advice, and you walk that talk too, because it's for oneself to figure out what one needs to do, whether it's defining something. You can have your own definitions of things too. You don't have to go by what is there out, um, or what people are thinking, or how they look at life. And I like the two words which you said, purpose and identity. And identity to a large extent is also how you look at yourself, apart from what others would think of it. Like you gave an example of Apple. People over a period kind of put somebody in a framework. Things can change. Apple can become worse, somebody can become better. So instead of putting in a framework, if people can just be so purpose driven. Thanks to Hari, I think, Hari and your discussions you mentioned. Many a times the small things that we learn is which has a huge impact on our life rather than the 20 years of learning in school. Like you said, we are all manufactured in the school to go fed into an industry, and so what is more important than all that is our own lives. I think to reflect back, to look back, and like you said, to talk to your own people at home, your friends, your colleagues, and see how they view on life. I think you gave me a beautiful example of your daughter not putting anybody in a religious framework of what has been experienced by our generation. They don't want to, because that's also one thing that they have not experienced, and their view on life is different. And like you said, life will have ups and downs, and it goes on depending on upon how you view life. 5,000 years back, there's a Tamil saying in Purananuru, they say, Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir. That means everybody is the citizen of the world. So I think it's all one full circle, right? It comes through, and we all realize that we're all citizens of the world. And if we all thought that way, this world will be a different place. But because we cannot think and we are incapable of thinking is when we start dividing in between countries, and then professions have become castes and religion and whatnot and all the confusion. But I think, like I said, purpose and perhaps meaning in life, if you all, if you want to purpose meaning, we want to find meaning in life, then we won't be worried about all this frills around us. So to me, that is the biggest takeaway from this. And I must tell you that this is going to stay with me for a long time to come. Uh, and also you took it across in such a beautiful way, because as they say, people who are really good at what they are doing don't complicate things. They make everything look simple. So they put, and you started your session with that, right? It's easy to write a long letter, but just to put it succinctly. And I think that comes by experience, one of the E's that you talked about. And for us, it's been experiential learning from you and from ourselves. So really appreciate. And it's been such a pleasure to have you over. Thank you. And we look forward to more such sessions from you. Thank you so much. You have a nice
Thank you, Nirupma. Thank you, Manisha. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for being
Thank you so much.
Okay.